So the story in the family is that when my father got my mother pregnant, when she get belly, he was living with an older woman named Auntie. So far, we've been talking about Bob. He's the fruit. But now it's time to get to the root. Mother Book, Cedella, her father, and of course, Norval Marley. My own life began in 1926 with my birth in the mountain bosom of Jamaica, in the district of 9 Miles, the parish of St. Anne, where my family has lived from an unknown time for past generations. So they're rooted in this area, right? The nights are misty and cool, the days warm, and afternoon rain so plentiful that everywhere you look, the slopes and hills are covered with thick green woodlands. A single mar road winds through the district, linking 9 Mile with other hillside villages and the seacoast plains of Jamaica. So she's giving us this picturesque view of where they're coming from. A lot of people would just simply call it country, but I appreciate the imagery. My mother bore, and I'm going to skip ahead, 9 children, 5 boys, 4 girls. Enid, Ivy, Jonathan, David, Solomon, Cedella, Amy, Surgeon, and Gibson. I was the sixth of 9 and the only girl to follow the birth of a boy. So her mother, 9 children. Okay? Which may explain why during my childhood I always loved to fight Madabuka, fighting. Mark you, I haven't heard that saying in a long while. Mark you. That's real Jamaican right there. I never went looking for a quarrel, but if trouble find me, whether in a shape of girl or boy, I always stood my ground. I remember how one time, right in front of my father, when my older brother was provoking me, I sprang out of my chair and thumped him hard in my mouth. What that? My father was so astonished that he bellowed and rushed outside to cut a switch. What them dog pick me up? Imagine, he roared, you jump up and thump your brother in the mouth right under his eye. He just couldn't believe that one of his daughters could be so willful and rowdy. She had to make sure she got that story in. For those who are wondering, we are reading from Bob Marley, My Son by Cedella Marley Booker with Anthony C. Winkler. My father was a man of many names. His given name was Omaria, a strict, godly, kindly man of a medium build and dark complexion. He was looked up to by the people in the community, most of whom used to call him Costas, a term of respect used by Jamaicans. And I think I'm going to put in picture right here, okay? This is a picture that the family shared. And others called him Ma Name, which was one of his nicknames, but the majority called him Costas. Even though he was very stern with us, I loved my father deeply. To this day, everyone says that I resemble him more than all his other children. And there were a lot, so let's continue. Although he was not a church going man, my father would sometimes read his Bible and tell us stories found in it and quote scriptures from its pages. So the person you saw in the beginning of the Bob Marley biopic, given the Bible, that's supposed to be Cedella's father. Okay. He also had a dozen or more women in the district who bore him 20 and 30 children. In fact, I know of 3 sisters in the district who had a total of 9 children for my father. So her father had, she said, between 20 and 30, and 9 between 20 and 30, somewhere in between there. So much picking ended up. So between the 3 sisters in the district who had a total of 9 and her mother who had a total of 9, that's 18 already. So anything after that, you count it to 30. The oldest sister, whose name was Lizzie, had 4. The second, Ruth, bore him 2 babies who lived and 2 died. And the third, Blanche, had 3 children. All the children of my father, including those he had with his lawful wife, who was my mother, grew and played together in the same district of 9 Miles. Do you remember the time Doesn't this sound familiar? All these children from all these different baby mothers all playing together in a one. Sounds very familiar. In addition to our house and its surrounding lands, my father owned another property of some 30 acres on a nearby mountaintop. On this property, which was named Smith, he had a house to which my mother never went because his other women might be up there. Does this also sound familiar? Hope Road. Other people, too much people I got through. Rita speaks about not liking to go there. Very these parallels. Again, now we're layering the generations, the similarities and the parallels from one generation to the next. Help, it says the women were up there helping him farm. Every day when my father went up to work the lands of Smith, my mother in turn silently tended her own plot of ground around our house. And in Rita's story, when she moved to Bull Bay, she had her own little garden around her house. And eventually, Bob got her some land in Clarendon and she was farming. Very familiar. So the legal wife was Cedella's mother. And then Cedella and Rita looked like Cedella, and Rita became this legal wife. Very similar. In our district, my father, who was a clever man, owned one of the only deco generators, which he would start up on Sundays whenever he wished to listen to the radio. Then friends and family would walk down from hills and gather around on the veranda to listen to radio programs, while all around us the still green mountains stretched everywhere that the eyeball can see. Sometimes we would hear a sermon from Kingston, sometimes rumba music from Cuba. And then I remember when we used to sit in a government yard. And guess what happened? People will come around and they will be playing music in the next generation. I'm going to go ahead and skip down here. My mother, whose name was Alberta, so Alberta is Cedella's mother, okay, but whom was known as Miss B or Miss Berta, was a kindly, gentle woman with a charitable heart. Everyone in our district loved her. Many years after her death, people would come up to us and tell us of some little kindness she had done them. The story in the family is that when my father got my mother pregnant, take note because I have three generations of a very similar story hitting at the same point. So we're going to listen with we as well. The story in the family. As a matter of fact, hold on. I'm going to run this commercial break and we're going to come back and tell about the story.
Real quick, this is Amuna, author and storyteller, and I have a new release available on Amazon because I love writing and reading stories. This is a Caribbean American tale about love and culture. We have a young girl named Jackie, and she gets into it with a lot of frenemies and some other people that's trying to take away our rights. So go ahead and check out Island Twist, available on Amazon today. Now let's get back to the story.
So the story in the family is that when my father got my mother pregnant, when she get belly, he was living with an older woman named Auntie. So they actually named Auntie Mai, who used to labor in the hot sun behind him in the fields. My mother's father sent for him, that a Omaraya, you know. So Alberta father sent for Omaraya and said, you give me that a belly. And told him that he had to do the right thing. And my father married my mother in a quiet wedding ceremony in Brownstown and took her in his buggy to the house on the hillside that he shared with his other older lady, or this other lady. So does this sound familiar? In this situation, it is Alberta's father. In Bob's situation, his father is not there. It's Cox and Dodd telling him, hey, do right by Rita. Some parallels, right? So this Omariah would be Bob Marley's maternal grandfather. Let's continue. My mother walked bravely up to the house, up the pathway to the house, and said to the old lady she found sitting on a small wooden veranda, good evening. I just want to let you know that I am now Mrs. Malcolm. Yes, Mom, the old lady replied meekly, bowing her head. With that, she went inside, quietly gathered up all her personal belongings and hurried away from the house she had helped my father build. That is so interesting. So you knock up this young Alberta. Alberta father said, no, 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 no. Come, 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 come. Yeah, she got married. They married. And the lady who he had at the house that helped him build it up, she, like, I don't know where you got to go, but you know what I mean? Auntie Mai, you ain't going to be around here, okay? So it says, but she came back to visit my mother often and soon became her helper in raising her children. I myself was this old lady's favorite and used to spend time with her at her own yard when I was a small child. Interesting dynamic. There's so much I could say. So much things to say right now. So much things to say. Sometimes my mother would become fed up with my father's women and return to the house of her own father. Me done with Mariah, man. That's too much woman about the place, man. I go back home, man. Go back home. After he had been away a few days, my father would go up to that house and ask to have his wife back. Man, that Mr. Alberta inside there, we can't get her and take her back home because she gone. And the pity them about. He says here, after she had been away for a few days, my father would go up to that house and ask to have his wife back. One time when he went to my mother's father spoke sharply to him, saying, nobody ever run with Frank good. If you want her to stay, you have to treat her good. Or to the people, pops. One day, I remember my mother was plaiting my hair on the veranda when one of my father's other women trips past. She said trips, yo. Trips past and spit pan her with scorn. My mother just continued to plait my hair and held her head high with pride and dignity and didn't even give any rebuke. Like, oh, not together, who you spit pan? She didn't do that. She didn't do that. She just plait the pitney head. Anyway, where are we? But later I heard her singing quietly to herself. I don't know how my mother felt about my father's other women, except from what I glimpsed occasionally with my child's eye over 60 years ago. But I do know that when the pressure got too much for her to bear, she would go alone to a place called Honeyland, which was her coffee field, and sing her heart out. And I would hear her beautiful voice echoing off the woodlands. To this day, whenever I feel myself feeling downhearted, I follow the example of my mother and sing away my heart's trouble. So, right now, we're taking a break off of Bob and going to see the parallels that he repeated in his life from the generation before. And so far, like I stated earlier in the video, we can see that there was a model modeled by his grandfather. We can see that the grandfather had a legal wife only because he was held into account by her dad, Alberta's father, which is Cedella's mother. We also can see that there was a place that the woman them would go, but the official wife would not go. And we could see the pain that that was causing the official wife while she was there, singing her heart away or singing her troubles away because of what was happening, right? And so this would have been deep within Cedella, it would have been within the family line that this energy is kind of like swirling in the ether, right? And so join us again because we're going to continue with Cedella. Let me know your thoughts and what you picked up in the description below. All right? Like, subscribe, and share. Big up to everybody.